Am I on? Am I on now?
Yes.
I was on when we were sharing God's love and peace, and I didn't want you to all hear what I was whispering to people. So I turned it on. Today's Trinity Sunday. What does that mean? I started to read some of the scholarly dissertations by the Bible scholars about Trinity Sunday. And when I woke up half an hour later, I thought, I don't think this is really going to work. So then I went to, and I always love to check in with David Lewis. He and I don't know, I think we were, brother and sister from another mister or something. I don't know, but, we seem to think so much alike. And this is what he wrote, and I just laughed right out loud. I'll be honest, I find Trinity Sunday among the most difficult days of the year to preach. As I've said before, I don't claim to understand the Trinity and don't trust those that report they do. The Trinity is at heart our best, if manifestly inadequate, attempt to capture in words the mysterious nature of God. It has something to say about both the unity and diversity of God's work and manifestation, and about the importance of community to God and all those whom God has created and loved. Beyond that, I don't have much to say. Okay. And he said, what we need to talk about instead is hope. And I thought, oh gosh, I talk about hope all the time. So I'm going to talk about something else. So I thought I'd talk about some really neat stuff. Sin, righteousness, and judgment. Did I kind of sound like a Southern Baptist preacher? I tried to do that.
Yeah.
You okay with that?
Especially judgment.
And I think it's important to talk about those, because in the verse in which we read about those in today's reading, it says, when the advocate comes, she will prove the world wrong about sin and righteousness and judgment. So I thought, well, we need to think about what that all means. And because in the United Church of Christ we believe in the still speaking God, and God is never done revealing to us God's self, or what God's call to us is, or what God needs done in this world, I thought, well, let me find something contemporary. So I'm reading 3 books. I told you that before. I like to read a bunch of things at once. So I thought I'd go to the 3 books I was reading and see what I could find on sin, righteousness, and judgment. And I found stuff. It's amazing. And these just happen to be the books I'm reading right now. It's not like I went and said, let me go find a book on sin. But this one, I don't know if anybody's read this one. It's called The Tempest Tales by Walter Mosley. It's really neat. It's a really neat read. So when I'm done with it, if somebody wants to borrow it, now I mark up my book, so you're welcome to borrow it. But in this book, this guy named Tempest gets shot and killed by the police. It's an accidental, well, they mistake him. It's a mistaken shooting. So, so Tempest is dead, and he's standing in line at the pearly gates waiting for his turn to come. And this is what it says. After many thousands of judgments, after millions of sins from blasphemy to murder, Tempest found himself standing before St. Peter. Tempest Landry, here, you stabbed Quentin Sams on July 16th when you were only 15. Excuse me, Your Honor, but that there was in self-defense. Q-Boy was reaching for the pistol in his pocket when he saw me kissing on a girl who had just broken off with him that morning. Peter looked up from his book with heat in his visage. No one had seen such a look since the Mahatma had refused the refuge of heaven. Running his finger down the page, Peter again began reading. At 18, you stole $314 from your mother's own church. Actually, I know it looks like I stole it from the church, but I really only took from Reverend Langley. I mean, I had seen him down at Bertha Burnett's cat house throwing away the congregation's money. And I used the money to pay for my auntie's groceries while she was out of work and recovering from the pneumonia. The way I saw it, I was taking the church's money away from the devil and putting it in the work for God the way it was meant to be used. Peter's stare this time lasted more than the 3 months needed to separate sin from saintliness in the arrogant Joan of Arc. When Peter went back to his notes, there was no compassion left in his voice. You bore false witness against Tiny Henderson when you knew that he was innocent. Your lies helped to convict this man of a brutal crime which he did not commit. Now judge. I admit that there has some gray area in these other accusations, but in the case of Henderson versus Harlem in general, I think that you would have to agree that it was my duty to bear false witness against that name. This was unthinkable. No guardian of Heaven's Gate had ever questioned a soul before him. Ever had a soul question him. Never. I mean, that Tiny Henderson had brutalized, raped, and murdered throughout our community and had not been convicted or jailed for years. I knew a man that he killed. I heard him brag on it. So when I lied before that magistrate, it was really a truth. Just that he hadn't done one thing, but he had done another. They didn't know what to do with Tempest. So they sent him back to earth with an angel, one of the accountants in heaven, so that he would see that his way had not been the way of God, and that he would admit that he was sinful, and by his admission he would then damn himself to hell, which is where St. Peter was telling him he needed to be. So 3 years after his death, Tempest reappeared on the corners of 135th and Lenox. He was wearing the same clothes, but his body was changed. He was still a black man, still under 40, but he had a new face that no one would have recognized. I walked up to him and said, "Hello, Tempest. Welcome back to Earth. Who are you?" "I'm your angel." "Angel? You mean that wasn't no dream? Look in the glass." "What happened to me?" "The Infinite has thrown you back, Tempest, and I have been sent along to monitor your progress." "Progress in what?" "You told the keeper that you saw no sin in your life." "How do you know?" "I was there. I was sent to help you re-examine the circumstances of that life. When you agree that the judgment against you was true, then you will enter immediately into hell. And if I don't agree? If not, there will be great turmoil in the heavens." I haven't finished the book yet, but it seems there's going to be great turmoil in the heavens from anything I can see that's happened in what I have read. When I was thinking about this particular book and the whole notion of what sin is and is not, I was thinking about what these pages I just read to you, and there's that television show out now called Motive. Do y'all watch that? Does anybody watch that? And I guess the premise of it is they tell you at the beginning of the show who committed a crime. So you know right from the get-go who did it. What you don't know as the show goes along, as you try to figure out, is why the person did it. And it seems to me that's what this wonderful author, Walter Mosley, is really putting out there for us in a contemporary piece of literature and asking us to examine. You know, what makes a sin a sin? And I think what Tempest Landry is saying is sometimes you do the right thing. No, he's not saying sometimes you do the right thing for the wrong reasons. He's saying sometimes you do the wrong thing for the right reasons. Yeah, I always thought it just the other way in spiritual direction. I obviously screwed it up since then. Sometimes you do the wrong thing for the right reasons. Now that's not the same as saying, I'm going to rationalize away what I did, although some people would say that's what he's doing here. But sometimes we're led to really difficult choices. And we're always trying to do the right thing, the best thing. And throughout this novel, every single time that Tempest comes and reports to the angel what he's done, it seems every single example is he's done another wrong thing for really good reasons. To take care of somebody who's vulnerable, who's widowed, who's orphaned, just like the Old Testament asks us to take care of them. And so it opens up a whole new idea to us around this notion of sin. In the late 20th century, one of the UCC theologians talked about sin. And he said, sin is separation. Sin is that which we do that separates us from one another, from God, and I think probably from our own hearts in some way. So we look at what we do in life, and I think we have to kind of say, is what I've done that which separates me? And if it is, then I need to fix that. You know, I've missed the mark, which is the Old Testament understanding of the word sin. I've missed the mark, and it's not like I get a free pass forever. You know, I missed the mark, I screwed up, I need to own that, and I need to not do that again. And I think that's what we try to do. Is that what we try to do? I mean, there are times we just mess up. You know, there are times we get angry. There are times we use hand signals to let others know what our anger is. There are times we have no patience with somebody who all they ask is our patience. I think the really harshness in sin is when we have to look at, I intentionally, deliberately chose to hurt that person. Because I don't think we can rationalize our way out of that one. I think we just have to look at that one and say, I'm not called to intentionally or deliberately hurt anybody, including myself. Including myself. Just did a 4-hour workshop on Thursday, and the 4th hour of it was dedicated to pastoral care. And Reverend Dr. Gene Simpson, who was leading the workshop, said this is the most important part of clergy boundary training, that you set some boundaries and you take care of yourselves. And she gave us a checklist. And it was not a short checklist. And there were things like, are you smoking? Are you drinking too much? Are you getting enough sleep? And it went on and on and on. You know, are you working too many hours? And all this stuff that maybe none of us think about as self-care, and if we don't do it, it becomes something which separates us from our own hearts. I mean, I think about drinking some weeks. I thought about that a lot this week. What? Who did? You did? But I've been told by a couple of physicians that I shouldn't really drink, so we'll see what the cardiologist says, but you know, I've been told that. So I don't do that, but I'm certainly tempted to do that some days. I remember when I was working on my doctoral dissertation, I started smoking cigars. Well, those little ones, you know, just the ones you puff down. But you know, we can harm ourselves. What do I do when I'm upset or bored? Now, I know none of you do this, so this will be my little confession. I eat. I know, hard to believe, isn't it? I eat. And when I don't get enough exercise, which I don't, because I always say to my doctor, but I get paid to sit. I'm paid to read and write and talk and think. That's what they pay me for. She says, go take the dogs for a walk. So there's that piece. If we think about sin as that which separates us, and some things that look like sin, we might need to think twice about it. Now, I'm not going to judge Tempest Landry here, but, you know, when you take it to that point, as the novelist does, well, yeah, he brutalized and raped and murdered people. I saw him kill man. I did testify falsely against him, but he deserved it because he never got caught for those other things. You know, what do we do with that? Is it legal? No. Was it ethical? I don't know. And I get to judgment in a minute. We'll talk more about that then. One of the things that we talked about this week in book club is we're reading this wonderful book by Nadia Bolz-Weber called Accidental Saints, Finding God in All the Wrong People. And as I turn the pages and go through it, I just keep putting your names on different places so y'all know you're in here. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. But one of the things she says in here is, we aren't punished for our sins as much as we are punished by our sins. Punished by our sins. How are we punished by our sins? Because who suffers when we choose to separate ourselves from our own hearts, from our loved ones, from God? We suffer. And here's the thing we know about God. That God, in this scripture and in these books, God is always inviting us back to God, back to God, back to God. You know, there's never anything we can do that God's going to say, you know what, enough, I've had it with you, we're done. God doesn't do that to us. I've been reading this book forever, and someday I'm going to finish it. It's Jan Karen's In the Company of Others. I don't know if anybody's read it. It's about Reverend Kavanagh, also known as Kavanagh, Tim Kavanagh, who's a little Irish guy who goes back to Ireland to check out his roots. He's got to be a Protestant because he's married. And I'm reading this on the plane, and I'm reading it when I'm up north with, you know, my granddaughters, our granddaughters, and I'm going, oh my gosh, I need to start marketing some of this stuff. You know, he's writing good stuff. So the second thing we talk about in this passage is righteousness. Okay, the Spirit's going to come and tell us about righteousness because it's different from what the world says about righteousness. Now, when we hear the word righteousness, most of the time we're thinking, I think, at least I'm thinking, self-righteousness, because I can't stand those self-righteous people that run around telling everybody else what to do. You know, the ones that stub out your cigarettes for you and dump your drinks somewhere and take your cards and throw them out the window if you're playing cards. You know those people. I was one of those when I was 16, but I'm not that anymore. One of my best friends, I swear to God, is a judge in Vermont now. And she used to do all this underage drinking, and I'd go with her, and I kept up there in the beer cans, and didn't matter. Didn't matter. Now she's a judge, and, you know, I don't have any position to speak of, but, you know, she did something important, so, you know, I guess she must have been right. But I think today, when we talk about righteousness, not self-righteousness, but righteousness, I think a more contemporary way for us to talk about that would be to think about it in terms of being in right relationship. You know, being in right relationship. And I don't know about you all, but I know when I'm not in right relationship because my stomach does somersaults. Now, I know people have other symptoms, but do you know, like, you know, when you're not in right relationship, doesn't your body tell you you're not in right relationship? Because really it's not separated from our heart soul. You get headaches, you get stomach aches, Blood pressure goes crazy. You start to yawn like Al's doing now.
At least he's still awake.
And what does that mean, my dear?
Just saying.
This is good for him then. And in this book, Tim Cavanaugh, the Reverend Cavanaugh, is off duty. He's on vacation for 4 weeks. But everybody keeps coming to him. And they're all Catholics. He's in Ireland, for goodness sake. And they say, well, I know you're not my priest, but can I just run something by you? And everybody's running stuff by him all the time. Well, this woman comes to him. She's one of the managers of the bed and breakfast where they're staying in Ireland. And she has a really hard time with her daughter. And so she says, can we just chat? And he says, yeah. So she says, well, can I ask you about love? And they're talking about their children. And he says to her, a lot of people think of love as warm and cozy, and that's certainly part of it. But it was hard to muster those feelings towards someone who vented his lifelong rage on me. I felt pretty sorry for myself sometimes. You see, his son, Dooley, he adopted as an older single dad, and Dooley's folks were alcoholics. And the father had left the kids, and Dooley was the oldest, and it was up to him to take care of his brothers and sisters. And at some point, he comes to Tim Cavanaugh's, and Tim Cavanaugh becomes his foster dad and then his adopted father. He says this to Anna, who's worried about her daughter, Bella. He says, it's love. It's not... Whoa. Spirit's here. Love, it's not the sort of thing romantics wish to hear, but I found that in the end, love must be a kind of discipline. If we love only with our feelings, we're sunk. We may feel love one day and something quite other the next. How many people in committed relationships understand what I just read? Thank you very much. He goes on, soon after he came to live with me, he was 11 years old at the time. I realized I must learn to love with my will, not my feelings. I had to love him when he threw his shoe at the wall and cussed my dog. Love him when he called me names I won't repeat. Love him when he refused to eat what I'd cooked after celebrating and preaching at 3 Sunday services. My God, what was wrong with this man? You get the idea, he says to her. I learned over a long period of trial and error to see in him what God made him to be. Wounded people use a lot of smoke and mirrors. They thrust the bitterness and rage out there like a shield. Then it becomes their banner, and finally their weapon. But I stopped falling for the bitterness and rage. I didn't stop knowing it was there, and there was a very good reason. But I stopped taking the bullet for it. With God's help, I was able to start seeing through the smoke. I saw how bright he was, like your Bella, how talented and how possible it was for him to triumph over so much that hounded him. To put a fine point to it, Anna, I stopped praying for God to change Dooley, and I asked God to change me, to give me Christ's eyes to see into the spirit of this exceptional, broken boy. Wounded people, broken people, know them, bend them, are them, live with them. It seems to me that all of us in some way have been wounded. If you're not, good for you. But life has its way with us, and the human condition isn't always kind. And we find ourselves in situations where we become wounded. Give me Christ's eyes to see into the spirit of this exceptional, person, whoever that is. I started talking to Dooley as if he were bright and industrious and savvy and trustworthy. I believed it was real, that he was already whole and able to love. And all I can say is it began to work for both of us. One day he was sent home from school for beating a classmate. He'd given him a good drubbing. Turns out he did it because the boy called me a nerd. Imagine that. This is a minister who goes on. I felt 12 feet tall. That I sent him to bed with no supper and ground him for a week? Did he? No. Right or wrong, I thanked him. I was never so touched. There's just no way to deal with their suffering except through love. And there was no way I could gouge that kind of love out of my own selfish hide without the help of God. And then another man comes to him, and he has left his wife. And he calls the reverend from wherever he's been, and he says, I want to get back with my wife. I need to run some stuff by you. So Tim says, okay. His advice for reconciliation with the spouse that had left him because he had been boorish and selfish and not very giving. The Reverend says, fish and chips. That's what you take her out for dinner for, fish and chips. Now we're in England. No flowers, no mushy cards, no lavish dinner, no expensive joy. And the guy could have done all of that and wanted to do all of that. He says, no. He says, all the strategies I've just suggested, that's the small stuff. Here's the big one. Ask God every day to give you the wisdom and courage to be all God made you to be. That'd be a short prayer in the morning. Oh God, please, just give me the wisdom and courage to be all you made me to be. Really short prayer. To be all you made me to be for your spouse, for yourself, for God. If you give God a chance in this and do the best you can, God will help you do the rest. When you were here, you said it would take a miracle to save your marriage. Unless there's something you haven't told me, you don't do miracles. And while you're at it, please pray for your wife. She needs wisdom and courage too. You're a team. Think like a team. In both of those examples from this book, that's a novel, and I never heard of this author. Maybe you all have. Be in right relationship. Love. When it gets tough to love, let love be a discipline. Don't forget that you and your beloved are a team, no matter what's happening. Be in right relationship. Okay, so that brings us to judgment. Is that not one of our favorite pastimes? Am I the only one that really enjoys sitting around judging other people, or do the rest of y'all do the same thing? There's a big difference between judiciousness and judgment. To be judicious means to be wise. If Jack the Ripper's running around my neighborhood and it's in the papers and the police have knocked on my door and told me that, do I leave the door wide open with the sign that says, welcome everybody, extravagant welcome here? That's judiciousness that my door is locked. But judgment is something else. And the Spirit teaches us that God's judgment is not the world's judgment, that the world got it wrong. And this is what Nadia Bowles-Weber has to say. She's talking about All Saints' Day and how the reading for that day in her church is always the Sermon on the Mount reading, the Beatitudes. Okay? Blessed are those who. And she says this. Maybe the Sermon on the Mount is all about Jesus' lavish blessing of the people about him on the hillside. blessing all the accidental saints in this world, especially those who that world, like ours, didn't seem to have much time for. People in pain, people who work for peace instead of profit, people who exercise mercy instead of vengeance. So I imagined on All Saints' Day, Jesus standing among us, offering these Beatitudes. Blessed are they who doubt, those who aren't sure, who can still be surprised. Spend a day without some doubt? Can't say I've spent many. It's all part of the journey. Blessed are they who are spiritually impoverished and therefore not so certain about everything that they no longer take in new information. The searchers, the ones who say, hey, the Baltimore Catechism you made me memorize when I was 7 isn't working for me anymore. Remember that? Do you remember it? We were taught it at 6 and 7. Who made you? And the answer, God made me. Why did God make you? To serve God here in this life and to be happy with God in heaven. If you weren't raised Catholic, if you were raised something else, I'm sure there was something else you remember that was equally black and white, easy to do, no questions asked that couldn't be answered. When I got to high school, and that was the time I was thrown out of religious ed by the nun. It happens. I met her later when we were both nuns. That was a trip. And I said to her, are we going to skip the chapter on sex again this year that you skipped last year when we were juniors? And that's when I was asked to leave. And the answer was, whenever you asked a question, and whenever I asked a question, I don't know about other people, whenever I asked a question that Sister couldn't answer, what Sister would say to me was, it's a mystery. I want to say, you know what? This whole class has been a mystery to me. It's a mystery? You know what? Everything's a mystery. Don't you get up some days and go, why the heck is this happening? I got up today and said, why do I have to go to work? It's Sunday. Shouldn't I be out on the golf course? Actually, that's more work for me. But to get up and not wonder, my goodness, how does the journey end? When you're 8, you've got all the answers at 7, you got to memorize, there's no more question to ask? Aren't we always asking questions? We came back from our friend's birthday party yesterday afternoon, and Mary said, I'm just dealing with that. Lymphoma and lung cancer. She gets chemo on Mondays and radiation, I don't know what day, Thursdays or something. She said, look, I got hair. They told me it's going to fall out again. But I still have some. Then she looked at me and said, you need to get a haircut. I want to say, why? So I could look like you? This is a good friend of ours. I'm having a hard time dealing with the lymphoma, and now she's got lung cancer. And people say, oh, well, she brought that on herself. She was a smoker when she was young. Really? Do you think God says that? I'm going to show you. You smoked when you were 18, 16, 14, 12, whatever it was you were. I'm going to show you? I don't think so. Blessed are those who have nothing to offer. Ever been one of those? Ever had a day when everything was gone and drained and given up and you had nothing left to offer? Blessed are they for whom death is not an abstraction. those who face it every single second because of where they are in their health journey. Blessed are they who have buried their loved ones for whom tears could fill an ocean. Blessed are they who have loved enough to know what loss feels like. Blessed are the mothers of the miscarried. Blessed are they who don't have the luxury of taking things for granted anymore. Blessed are they who can't fall apart because they have to keep it together for everyone else. Oh yeah. I won't ask you to raise your hands, but oh yeah. Blessed are those who no one else notices. The kids who sit alone at middle school lunch tables, the laundry guys at the hospital, the sex workers, and the night shift street sweepers. Blessed are the losers and the babies and the parts of ourselves that are so small, the parts of ourselves that don't want to make eye contact with a world that loves only the winners. Ah, is that not our society? We love the winners. Blessed are the forgotten, the closeted, the unemployed, the unimpressive, the represented. Blessed are the teens who have to figure out ways to hide the new cuts on their arms. If you've been that teen or know that teen, or that teen is in your family as that teen is in mine, you know how difficult that is. You are of heaven, and Jesus blesses you. Blessed are the wrongly accused. Oh, that would be the one Tempest did in. The ones who never catch a break, the ones for whom life is hard, for Jesus chose to surround himself with people like them. Blessed are those without documentation. Blessed are those without lobbyists. Blessed are foster kids and trophy kids and special ed kids and every other kid who just wants to feel safe and loved. Blessed are they who know there has to be more than this, because they are right. Blessed are those who make terrible business decisions for the sake of people. Blessed are the burned out social workers and the overworked teachers and the pro bono case takers. Blessed are the kind-hearted NFL players and the fundraising trophy wives. Blessed are the kids who step between the bullies and the weak. Blessed are they who hear that they are forgiven. Blessed is everyone who has ever forgiven me when I didn't deserve it. If we spent one day without judging everyone we see around us, including ourselves, imagine what a different world we would be creating. This is what God is asking us, to see how the Spirit sees, to see how Jesus sees, to see all these things that we judge, perhaps differently, to be in right relation with one another, with our own hearts, however sad or broken or torn they are, does not matter. Let us be in right relation with them and with our God, who always, always calls us to be lovers. Amen.